unanimously accepts the findings of the Moseneke report. In particular, the Commission notes the rationale and central thesis of the report that community immunity through mass vaccination must be considered as a desirable step in the conduct of a safe, free and fair elections in the Republic. Insofar as the recommendation pertain, the Commission will adjust implementation to accord with current legal prescripts and financial means. Where there are substantial financial implications, National Treasury will be approached. For its part, the Commission has determined immediate causes of action given the urgency of the matters canvassed in the report.
Glenton Mashinini, the chair of the Electoral Commission, there making today's big news announcements that the Electoral Commission accepts the recommendation by the former Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke to approach a court, the Electoral Court or the Constitutional Court. They haven't decided yet to ask to postpone the local elections currently scheduled for October. Mmusi Maimane is the leader of the One South Africa movement. Mmusi, good afternoon to you. Well, the Electoral Commission asked for a report from the former Deputy Chief Justice. It received the report. It would have been a major problem for them not to implement the report in a way. They had to agree with his findings. They had to accept them.
Sure. Good afternoon, Stephen, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I think given that the report and its terms of reference was tabled by the IEC, I think that the recommendations that have come from it, saying that it needed to be 4 months, I think is not necessarily something that ought to be binding on the IEC itself, because I think given the context of a 4-month period, knowing that the period in between it is Christmas, January, and as the report itself states that by February we'll be entering into what potentially could be the first phase of a 4th wave, I think that it is quite something to suggest that we would have hit community immunity and secondly be in a position to hold elections. I think it's a false assumption. I maintain that elections are going to be held under COVID restrictions anyways, whether you do them now or next year. And therefore, I would have much preferred for the IEC to say on an urgent basis, we require additional funding that whatever and whenever we need to hold the elections, preferably this year, from our point of view, that it actually can be done in a COVID-ready environment.
Mmusi Maimane, it's an important conversation that we're having. I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, that you press the pause button on that, and Mmusi, for a moment. I mean, the Olympic Games, South Africa competing as one nation, is a reminder of what we're aspiring to be, a nation united.
Absolutely, and I think in many ways, conflict doesn't always have to lead to division. Sometimes it can lead to clarity of values, and our country has undergone much conflict that has meant that we need that sense of going right. We've heard your argument, we hear our argument. The best route forward is this way. And given the context of where our country is, I do get a sense that if we were to have an election, we'd have a reset moment, a moment that says South Africa is heading back to normal as quickly as possible, and we're preparing ourselves to really take on the global stage in a much bigger way. But I want to wish the team well as they partake in these Olympics.
I want to sort of pick up on something you've said there, which is about the idea of the elections at the moment. And I mean, again, it's impossible to assess a national mood without proper polling, and there is no polling that I'm aware of. But certainly there's a sense of sort of aggro, I suppose is the phrase my mother would use. There's a sense of anger or frustration at the moment. We all understand why. We saw the results of that last week to an extent after the lockdown and all of the divisions and the anger and the frustration. And I've always found, and you also spent a lot of time at the Electoral Commission headquarters after an election. After an election, it seems the country comes together in a really important way. I do wonder if that's a good reason just to have the election just for that moment.
I think more than anything, Stephen, if you reflect on the global mood at the moment, countries that despite herd immunity, I mean, the UK is experiencing a surge in infections, even in the midst of a community that's been well vaccinated. but they are living a life upon which they are going. We can host World Cup events or Euro events. We can focus ourselves on rebuilding and getting on a foot of what does tomorrow look like. And I think prolonging elections, as we will this time, puts us in an additional 4 months of serious anxiety, because you might live in a municipality that works well and therefore you have a right to go express that vote. But what if you don't? What if you live in a municipality that's got no water, no electricity? If you prolong it for 4 months longer, you are asking those residents to find different expressions. And I do worry that we forgot quite quickly that prior to the recent unrest that have taken place in the last week, that before that, Bloemfontein was on fire. You'll remember that there was a municipality being set on fire by residents saying they were unhappy there. Now, how many of those do we need to have, that some of them are driven by insurrection or counter-revolutionary, whichever one the government wants to choose? And then how many of those will we have just as ordinary service delivery protests heading towards the December period? So I do think there's something that post-election gives us a reset, gives us a place to express that frustration, and ultimately say those who have failed we hold accountable, and we can build a future for all South Africans coming from there. And there's nothing that feels good better than just simply saying we have new leadership now, which engenders new hope to say we can get these things right.
We remember your testimony at the Electoral Commission, at the panel probing this, in which you suggested that the elections should still go ahead. I do wonder if one of the problems that we're going to have now is that everyone is going to fight not about the issues that sort of matter to us as South Africans, largely around trying to get economic growth, trying to get income for people, issues around, say, a basic income grant, for an example, but trying to make South Africa better. Could we be divided again just by the argument about whether the election should happen now in the middle of a pandemic? It can be a very divisive argument.
I think we won't be as divided on that issue as it is, because I think South Africans who understand that we're having this discussion in the middle of a COVID pandemic. So I think the backdrop to this issue still means that the debate is necessary. But it isn't one that is divisive. I think what will be divisive is whether the party political system will take control of that metal and seek to add further to the postponement. So when I think about the court action, for example, will the political parties sit with the IEC and simply say, let's postpone further than just even 4 months, etc.? Given that what we learned from the recent unrest is that actually mobilization didn't need stadium rallies. It didn't need any of that. For the wrong reasons, people use technology, WhatsApp, to be able to mobilize. Now, my question is, why can't political parties equally learn from that? Or certainly for us in a movement, we've had to learn that hard lesson and then say to ourselves, actually, we need to shorten the period of contestation as possible. So to me, that's why, in some ways, a postponement means that that disagreement lingers for much longer, certainly going into a fresh year. Wouldn't it be great if you went into a new year with a new council, new elected officials, new mayors, with a sense of going, 2022 can't be the same as 2021, but we will begin it literally with fever pitch elections, given the current context our country sits in.
Mmusi Maimane from the One South Africa movement, thank you very much indeed. Do appreciate the time. Well, staying with the story, the Electoral Commission also announcing that they will consult with the National Treasury on the dates of voter registration weekends.